Now we're going to break our rule. A couple weeks ago, we issued an official, unofficial ban on hypotheticals for the rest of the year. But we're going to make one exception because it's Cardinals week, and we got to talk about something other than the Cardinals, who are a joke. So let's talk about Trey Lance. Brock Purdy's still undefeated, and if he keeps playing like this in the playoffs, it's his job. So if Trey Lance ends up being an expensive project that doesn't work out for the 49ers, is that a big mark against the organization no matter what happens to Brock?
I think that's one of the big questions for this organization. Let's say Trey Lance turns out never to work out for the 49ers. He didn't get enough experience, and he may not have the necessary skills to be a top-level quarterback. They gave up a lot for him, 3 first-round picks, Iggy. But here's what I would say. It's not a mark against the organization. Every organization makes mistakes. Bill Walsh makes mistakes. Yeah. Now, it's a big mistake. They gave a lot for him. But on the other hand, they got a quarterback.
Right.
You look to the right for a quarterback. You think you're going to get Trey, but he's on the left, and he's Brock Purdy. So they were able to make up for that mistake, and they got Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
So I would say, of course, if it turns out to be a blunder, they wish they didn't make it. But my attitude is you wipe your hand across your mouth and you move on. There are any number of mistakes every good team makes, and they were able to compensate for the mistake. So I let them off the hook.
Yeah, I mean, the job is to find a franchise quarterback. That's not easy to do. If you find one and he's Brock Purdy, you succeeded.
Yep.
That's it. You succeeded. Now, if Purdy didn't exist and Trey Lance was a failure, then that's a fireable offense. Or you could argue. But it's a big deal. But the fact that they have Purdy makes it really a non-issue. Really a non-issue. So good
I
for
think
them.
so. Yeah. So what I want to say is Iggy and I are often critical of the Niners, and sometimes for very good reasons. But in terms
only sometimes
of their
only
quarterbacks
sometimes. Sorry.
And putting together this roster, great job.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that's, I think, really tough for Trey is that he was a project quarterback. He needed a ramp up. He needed development. And it's not a developmental league.
No.
He's the opposite of Purdy. And the Niners never even really started the process. I think there's examples like Buffalo developed Josh Allen. It can be done, but the Niners didn't really do it, and it's hard to do. And now they got a quarterback who they don't have to do that with. He doesn't need development. I mean, he can strengthen his arm, do little things, but he's essentially he's a veteran right now. And that's what they needed. That's the right quarterback for them. And I think in the future, you're going to see fewer and fewer teams spend high picks on quarterbacks that need a lot of development. And I think you're going to see experienced quarterbacks that stayed in school and graduated go higher. I think you're going to see a flip in priorities.
Another question is, did the Niners make a mistake in drafting Trey Lance? I tend to think they did. I tend to think that they went out on a limb.
Yeah.
Now, he may turn out to be Patrick Mahomes,
right,
but he hasn't, and they haven't known how to do it. Again, I'm not faulting them for it because they got the other guy, but probably it was a mistake. What do you think, Iggy?
I mean, it was unprecedented. 1-year starter, played in like basically Division II football, 3rd pick in the draft. I mean, even though he went undefeated, he took a year off because of the pandemic. His resume was not a top 3 pick resume. His athleticism was, I mean, the idea of what he could become was absolutely worthy of a top 3 pick, but his resume, no one that inexperienced had ever been picked that high. And I think, like, you go back and look at what Walsh did getting Steve Young. He didn't trade 3 first-round picks for Steve Young. He traded a 2nd and a 4th. He found a value. It's like he went to, the secondhand store. What the Niners did was they spent a lot, too much. They bought high on a guy who had never played in the NFL.
Right. Yeah. I don't think Bill would have done that. So I think probably, let's say, as of this moment, I think it was a mistake, but I don't know what the future will bring.
Right. It's funny. Like, it was a mistake, and it was probably obvious at the time. Like, he has a chance of reaching his full potential, but the Niners didn't do the right thing, didn't take the right steps to give him that chance. And so in a sense, they're culpable if he doesn't work out, which makes it worse. But again, if the last pick in the draft turns out to be everything you hope Trey Lance would be, sorry, Trey, the organization's fine. That's harsh reality. And I do feel bad for Trey because the Niners, keeping him on the back burner, it could really essentially ruin his career. If he gets to 24 and hasn't played, what is he going to be? And the Niners, at least they got Purdy, but if you were Trey's agent right now, you'd be thinking, how do I get him out of Santa Clara?
As far as Purdy is concerned, I'd still like to know how the Niners heard about him. Who told them?
Yes.
I understand that they interviewed him, Zoom, and they had tape. Who said you got to look at this kid? I would love to know that.
I believe it was Steve Slowick.
Who's that?
Steve Slowick is a pro scout. He's in his 4th season with the Niners. Let me see which his area is. Okay. Pro football. He was a Pro Football Focus. Also spent 3 seasons as a wide receivers coach at Horizon Scottsdale High School in Arizona. So I don't know what exactly his area is, but his brother is the passing game coordinator for the offense, Bobby Slowick. So from what I heard, he was the scout, Steve Slowick, that initially identified Brock Purdy and told him, hey, Brian Greasy, Clay Kubiak, you guys might want to check this guy out. And apparently they were instantly intrigued.
I love it. Again, so if they screwed up with Lance, look at what they did with Purdy. And look at how efficient and persistent they were.
And remember the process of getting Lance. They wanted to get it seemed like they wanted to get Stafford, they wanted to get Watson or Rodgers, and it didn't work out. And they made that trade a month before the draft. And Kyle said they did it so that they could evaluate the quarterbacks at the top of the draft. So by their own admission, they didn't really evaluate those quarterbacks very well. With Purdy, it seems like he was the normal process, someone who'd been in college a long time that the Niners scouts were tracking for years. They don't just start looking at them when they're seniors. They start looking at them when they're sophomores, freshmen and sophomores. And so I'm sure they graded him as a sophomore, as a junior, as a senior. And the guy said, we liked him a little bit more a few years ago, but here's what we know about him, and we like these and these things. And they probably had a very extensive file on him. Whereas with Trey, they probably didn't. He didn't play that much football. They didn't scout him that long.
Right.
Yeah. So at least they've done this before at other positions where they've taken a big swing at a guy in free agency or in the draft and it hasn't worked out. Like, for example, they wanted Reuben Foster as to be their linebacker extraordinaire. Didn't work out, but they got Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round. He's everything they wanted Reuben Foster to be.
Right. And he's a solid citizen.
Yeah, and no one criticizes the Niners for wasting that 1st-round pick on Reuben Foster. They got the guy they wanted. They just got him later.
That's right. And that may be what's happening with the quarterbacks.
It may be. We'll see.